Well, this is an adaptation of a Dostoevsky novelette. What drew you to that as a material for your second film? And how does that book resonate for you?
Well, the idea to adapt it was Avi Kareen, who I ended up writing with. So initially it was just his first draft script that I liked, and I read the book after that. But I guess the thing that I liked about it was this idea that you could be so invisible and meek and inconsequential that if your double appeared, as it does in the book, that no one would notice. That just seemed an unusual way to take that idea. Normally, everyone notices, it's really strange, it's remarked upon. And also the fact that once you point out to other people that this person looks exactly the same as you, no one cares. Just seemed very funny to me and one other person. And it was that, really. I just really liked that idea.
The other person being Avi?
I guess. And hopefully one member of a paying public at some stage. But yeah, it just seems so unusual, that idea. It's just such a strange way to take it. And it reminded me a bit in, say, Phantom of Liberty, the Buñuel film, when there's that sketch where the parents come in and say, "We've lost our daughter, we don't know where she is," to the teacher, and then the daughter wanders up to the front of the classroom and goes, "I'm here." And the teacher goes, "Well, this is terrible, we're going to have to look for her." And she just follows them around while they keep looking for her and just go, "We can't find her anywhere." And the daughter's still there. It just had that kind of feel to me.
So there's a kind of you have a strong affinity for absurdism, I guess.
It just seemed funny to me. And it didn't seem, in some ways, it doesn't seem that strange. It just feels emotionally right. And there can be something off-putting about something that's meant to be real. You know, kind of I think often things are called surreal if they are meant to deviate from what is considered a kind of realistic depiction of something. But at some stage with realism you go, is the ultimate aim for you to be that exact person in that person's skin, also eating that cupcake in that realistic way? As in, what's the logical end of realism? Is it complete assimilation with the screen? At some, you kind of know you're watching a construct, and that's part of the pleasure. And so it really depends on whether you find what's being presented interesting or not, regardless of how much it corresponds to some idea of...
So this film, in a certain way, kind of pulls the carpet out from under you in that idea of kind of believing in a construct.
Well, I think it just presents something that feels emotionally right with conviction. That's what the book does. You know, I can't possibly defend the film, but you know, the sense I got in the book was just, you just go with this impossible thing, and it just unravels in the same way in, you know, Metamorphosis. You don't go, well, this is impossible. You just, I don't know, it just feels right. It feels kind of true in some way.
Your first film, which was also written by Avi Kareen, also has a kind of a similar sense of kind of sort of intensified sort of emotion. They're both very emotional films, and yet, you know, professionally, up until you directed these two films, you're kind of associated with something that's kind of lighter and more, you know, basically comedic, without that kind of emotional undertow.
What, Raging Bull?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, well, just because Avi might not want to be held responsible for the first film, he didn't write that. I did, but, you know, just to get him off the hook.
I thought he wrote that.
No.
Oh.
No, it wasn't his fault.
So that was your fault?
Yeah, it was my entire fault.
Okay, I got my wires crossed there.
He wrote Mr. Lonely with Harmony, his brother, and several important pamphlets thereafter. But yeah, he didn't write that. He can't be blamed.
Well, anyway, the question still stands that you've made two films that have this kind of really unusual kind of emotional kind of undertow to them, and that's not something that up until you made these films you've been associated with. So obviously you're expressing a different side of yourself in these films. I wonder if you could talk about that.
Well, I guess, I was in this show called The IT Crowd, but that wasn't a show I wrote. So in that I was really trying to, not annoy the director, and do what he would like within my incredibly narrow band of capabilities. Whereas with this, it was a completely different thing, and they're both adaptations, and they just had different. Yeah, they just had a different feel. So I was completely happy to be in a show where, your function is to kind of defend one character and just do that. And
the one way in which this film is a little bit reminiscent of The IT Crowd is in the speed of it. The rapid dialogue, the kind of almost screwball kind of pacing of it, and I guess that's one way of kind of cramming a lot of material into 90 minutes instead of it kind of sprawling. But I'm really interested in why you adopted that kind of that style of dialogue, of people really kind of speaking really fast and over each other.
Well, I suppose partially I just like it, and I sort of feel that often in films, under the guise of a kind of realism, you just have a lot of umming and erring, which it just doesn't necessarily feel necessary. Otherwise, it will feel like this, which is, who wants this? And also there is a sense that in this film, no one listens to him. Everyone's just talking, and they're in their very fast own monologues, which are juxtaposed with these long periods of silence, and whenever someone speaks, it's kind of like a uncontrolled, eruption that he can't quite grab a hold of. Everything kind of passes him by before he can properly interact with it. And also no one's really listening to anyone else, I guess was partially the idea.
In the original script that you read, was it couched in this kind of, I guess, sort of retro futuristic kind of world, or is that what you brought to the material?
It was less like that. It was more. It was never meant to be an exact replica of reality. It was always slightly off. But I guess the particular, European feel came in when we were going to be filming it in England, and it became less of a big metropolis. David presided over this. Was it particularly? Did it change a lot?
Yeah, it started much kind of simpler, cleaner, more modern. I think once we found that location.
Yes, we found this place, which was an abandoned business centre with an underground gun range, which is unusual in England. Yeah. And there's probably an underground gun range here, but in England this isn't usual.
So that was where the entire film was basically shot. You used that.
Yeah, it was all done in this place. And yeah, I guess in the script it wasn't specified particularly that the buildings would look like this, or it kind of started to become apparent when we looked for locations. But also our references weren't so. It was one of the many, wanted David because of his work as well, but there's something about having an American designer working in England that seemed interesting, that would create a hodgepodge. He doesn't agree. But, that seemed interesting to me.
I mean, it's odd, but watching it again tonight and being able to really get the sound, because the first time I watched it, I wasn't watching it in a movie theater.
iPhone.
The sound, in particular, started to make me think of David Lynch's Eraserhead.
Sure.
And I began to feel like this was kind of a constructed, sort of parallel reality. The way the world of Eraserhead is it's sort of on planet Earth, but yeah, kind of a different parallel version of it. And I'm really interested in the way the sound kind of, there's this kind of like thumping, booming sort of undertone almost throughout the film, and then it stops, and then it reasserts itself at certain sort of dramatic moments.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in your use of sound. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I mean, the sound took longer to do than the film, effectively. It took 5 months, so it was always going to be an important element of it, and really, yeah, I mean, it's sort of unforgettable, Eraserhead, when you just can't get those sounds out of your head. And really, the sound to this was built on a variety of kind of repeated and layered loops of things that just kept going round, which felt kind of appropriate for this, and were made with kind of old, kind of 60s guitar pedals, and like the computers are cat purrs, in loops, and various things like that. And he's furious. You shouldn't use cats for that. It's not appropriate. But the idea was really that with sound you have a kind of more direct link to people than necessarily with pictures, because you're always kind of trying to construct a meaning from two juxtaposed images, or you're scanning around, whereas you tend to either just lean into sound or not, I think. And
it has a kind of more of a visceral kind of impact.
Yeah, I think so. And I like, I guess, non-sync sound, I suppose. Like, one of the things I really like is this Fellini film that's in Spirits of the Dead, Toby Dammit. And just, I don't know, there's something about those dubbed films, because they're out of sync. There's a kind of freedom, it feels, to the images, and there's a directness to the sound. They have very few elements, and they're all meant to be doing something. They're very rarely just descriptive.
Let's take some questions from the audience. I'm sure they have lots. A question about the camp sort of science fiction show that's on the television set that he watches, and how did he arrive at that, and was there more?
Yeah, there was more. We made these scenes in their entirety, and then selected them depending on what he was watching, so that we'd have the whole thing. That was something that probably came later, when I started working with Avi, and it was really, I like it in films when people watch other things, and it's nice to make those things rather than it just being, CSI Miami. And so it felt that also it was interesting possibly to have the science fiction thing in this slightly odd world, that this would be a ridiculous idea of masculinity and what being assertive would be. So, yeah. As in, he's two people?
He used to be a shy guy, and now he's more outgoing. Is that basically it? Yeah, okay.
I mean, no. I mean, it'd be great if it was a companion piece to that narrative, but it was just, I think he's great. Since Squid and the Whale, I just thought he was, I think that film's perfect, and he's so good in it. And then I think he's one of those actors who plays very different characters, but always feels like himself, if that's not doesn't sound contradictory, in the way that someone like Jack Lemmon had that. In that he's not someone who goes through these enormous physical transformations. He didn't rely on sideburns to differentiate character, these kind of things. And so, because these people had to look exactly the same, and that was part of the premise, it felt he would be good. And it's difficult to really imagine someone of his age, 30, who has that kind of ability. Like when Avi and I were talking about it, we said historically it's kind of Dustin Hoffman or Jack Lemmon. It's one of those parts, someone who's able to be both downtrodden and confident, and it not feel like the other one's just put on. And yeah, I think he completely has that ability. So we didn't ask anyone else. He was the only person we asked, and we just waited till he was free.
I don't know if it was that I just got muddled up at a certain point, but there seemed to be a moment where Simon and James kind of switched bodies or switched roles. It's the scene in the restaurant where he's on the date and then he goes into the bathroom and James is in there with the headphones giving him instructions, and then the next thing you know, he's James and Simon is and Simon becomes James and James becomes Simon.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything that really signaled that. It was just a switch.
Yeah.
Does that happen more? Does that happen again a few times in the film? It was a genuinely kind of befuddling moment for me.
Well, that's good news for the test scores. Well, yeah, I mean, they kind of swap clothes, really, in that James just, pretends he's going to help Simon out and then doesn't. But more or less, that's the only kind of swap outfits moment or something, because the rest of the time they're always wearing exactly the same clothes. And in a way, the logic in the book and in the film is that really whatever would be the worst thing to happen for Simon is what happens. So it's more of a dream logic, really, whereby the thing that meant you could, get on the catamaran no longer applies.
What's the challenge, I guess, of shooting scenes where you have two characters played by the same actor?
Well, I mean, in some ways it's the same as it's been since Georges Méliès, really. It's kind of it's a split screen, and one actor plays one part. So Jesse has an acting double, and so rehearsals are twice as long. You rehearse both characters, and then Jesse, say if he's playing Simon, will do the Simon part to the acting double who's playing James. You record that, and then you have to pick one of the takes on the day, and then he'll listen back to the selected take in an earpiece and do the other side of the conversation. This isn't, when you physically see both of them in the frame. The only difference now is that there's motion control, this device which allows you, I'm sorry if it's, everyone just knows, yeah, we know what motion control is, you idiot, where, the camera is computerized and so it can repeat a move. And then the trick is making sure that people are looking at one another correctly, and the standard for it is very different to in a normal scene. If you're me, I can barely maintain eye contact with anyone. But you really scrutinize it when it's impossible. There aren't two, his interview body of work notwithstanding, Jesse Eisenberg's. And so they're not looking at one another, so you have to be careful with the eye lines and where they're looking and the rhythm of it. And then if it's a single, it's just almost standard coverage, and you have a body double and you do your over the shoulders and those kind of things as you would if you normally we're doing a single in a scene. So, but the job that's hardest is Jesse having to, do what's strange for an actor, which is to, in some way, not be in the moment, because it's more like recording a drum track and then having to do the next instrument. Like, you have to stay within the rhythm of the first performance, and that's, very hard. But he's one of those actors who's technically adept and without compromising his emotional engagement or whatever.
Given that that's the way you approached it, were there things in the script or certain actions in the scene that dictated which character you would cover first?
It was generally clear which character was dictating the pace of the scene, and that tended to be the character that you did first. And generally it was James, because James is the more dominant one, so we tended to do him first because he would set the rhythm into which Simon would interject. I guess there's like the Munch kind of etching self-portraits that he did. I guess Magritte and Munch, those two. Yeah.
So yes. Two questions. One was, I guess, the film version of 1984 a reference point or an inspiration to this? And secondly, what's up with the pigeon?
Okay.
Oh, the chicken. Chicken?
Was there a chicken?
Do you mean the music?
Maybe it's
Uh,
the what? Oh, the balloon, and then the pigeon flew in.
yeah, it's a pigeon.
Yeah. It could be a chicken if you wish. If it helps to discuss. I mean, I felt it was already hostile, and so if it backs it off by it being a chicken, we can call it that. So the thing with the chicken was that, well, the actual story is that our cameraman, while we were doing our recce's, saw this pigeon pretending to be a chicken on the floor, and another chicken or pigeon, they didn't specify, had built a nest within it. And that seemed a good image, which has, resonated so profoundly with you tonight. So that was what was up with that. And so that was the thing, but it was not, we didn't view this as, the eye of the duck scene or anything. It was a small thing, or the eye of the chicken. With regards to 1984, I haven't seen that film. But I've read the book, and no, not really, in that I feel with that and with Brave New World, which again I've read, when I was at school, it felt that they're overtly kind of satirical about a kind of totalitarianism or a bureaucracy or a kind of complete overtake by the state, which this did not feel was really doing. The main feel in this was the human story between, Simon and Hannah, and that it's not really a kind of critique of bureaucracy, or it's not really, the book has a lot of stuff about Russian clerical life, which, we didn't feel desperate to bring up to date. And so that wasn't key for us, I guess.
Question about why Richard didn't act in either of these films. Does he want to keep his directing and his acting separate?
I mean, I've seen myself, so, obviously I can't cast myself with the knowledge I now have. So, I find it impossible to imagine not being able to think of someone better. I mean, in any role, even the role of me, I could think of 20 people who could do that better. So, yeah,
Right. Why the use of Japanese pop music all the way through the film?
I feel a lot like I'm giving a deposition here. Can you explain where you were on the night of the... What the hell were you thinking throughout this entire process? That's what we'd like to know.
Welcome to the world of
Q&As.
Q&As.
How do you look at yourself in the mirror? Jesus. What's wrong with you? Well, really the idea was that this isn't in any specific country. It's not a specific world or time period, and that there should be a sort of element of dislocation to it. And it felt, appropriate that you have this architecture that's European, but it's not a very brutalism is not the main architecture in Europe, so it's a slightly strange thing, and the cast is international, some are American, some are Australian, some are English, Ghanaian, and that it felt that the music shouldn't evoke a specific nationality that tied in with where it was. There's also the added benefit of it doesn't clash with English-speaking voices. That's good. And I saw the Blue Comets on the Ed Sullivan Show on one of those package reruns of bands on them, and I just really liked that song. And then I always wanted to use it in a film, and then it came out of that. It just felt, I don't know, that it fit to me. but that might not be an adequate explanation.
Yeah, a question about the hospital scene where Simon sees someone who's a double of the security guards at work, and is that supposed to suggest that this experience is happening to other people?
Well, I mean, you really see the whole film through Simon's eyes, so it's really, what he's seeing, and I guess it's a moment where he might doubt whether what he has seen is true or whether his experience is unique, yeah.
Were there other sort of projects you were considering when you settled on this one?
And you chose this. Did you have any? This makes me think.
I didn't ask the question. She asked the question.
It just these friends of mine who do this show, The Mighty Boosh, that Julian Barrett in it. He had this thing called The Pod, which was about these two electro dance pioneers, and they released music as a virus and all of these things. And he was in a meeting explaining it for about half an hour and how, things were released as tablets and just very... And then the person went, yeah, it's great. Have you got any other ideas? And that felt like that. But this preceded Submarine, this was always the idea to do next, and there was a time when we weren't sure which could happen first, and it felt like this would be better to do after Submarine. But yeah, no, there wasn't, I skirted round Avatar, but that was the only thing that was...
You couldn't see the point.
I just felt I'd said everything that there could be said about whatever it says. I'm quite lazy. People, not really. I mean, RV script's the only thing I've read that I really felt I could be involved with in some way. And it really depends. No, I think I'd find it hard to just direct a script that was just sent and just not be involved in it more than that, just because, I don't know, in some ways it feels that a lot of directors just making decisions, and then, I don't know what decision to make if you haven't participated in what it should be at some level. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. Does it? Not so much? Yeah.
Do you have a script for him?
Are you going to bear a grudge? Do you bear grudges? No, it's fine.
See you outside.
I do know I've disappointed you. But that's... You really want to get this one out of the way, right? Okay. I hope something else will happen before I die. Who knows?
There do seem to be rumors that you do have a third film.
I don't know. It's hard to say. Who knows? It's up and down. But it's good. He's great, David, you can stand up and do a twirl and say, it's very David Crank, and he's great. He's just done Inherent Vice, and he won PTA's here, and oh, what's that? Sorry.
Were you thinking at all of the Coen brothers or Malkovich in this dark?
Do you mean being John Malkovich? Yeah. Was he thinking of either the Coen brothers or being John Malkovich?
Were we thinking of being John Malkovich? No, apparently we weren't thinking. We weren't thinking of being John Malkovich. Were we thinking of the Coen brothers? No, apparently again, no, not the Coen brothers. Were we thinking of Dirty Dancing? Well, we were thinking of Dirty Dancing quite a bit, apparently. What's happening? What were we thinking of? I don't know. It's strange. In some ways, I don't know that any one making films now, you know, everyone's seen a million films and they're just kind of there, and you're just, you know, you could almost say any story and you could just list 10 things that it's like. So you have a sense of it, of other things. I mean, I was thinking probably of In the Mood for Love quite a bit, in that you see this, that's a great film. And it's good. Because you don't see any wides in that film. You're not given any geography. It's just small bit. You don't really know what they do in that office. It just doesn't really matter. It's just so focused on them. It just doesn't orient you in any way, which we really liked. And then Aki Kaurismäki we're thinking of quite a bit. And I don't know, who else? After Hours, even though it doesn't really look like After Hours, we thought of that a bit. You know, and then every month we insisted on having one idea of our own. But that was it, you know. And that was only if we couldn't rip someone else off. You know, if we were desperate.
Can you
David
tell
would
us
come
which
up with an
ideas were
idea.
you on?
I mean, there were 2 that David came up with, and that's all we needed. That was it. The rest was just a tessellation of other people's stuff.
Question about the cameo by Jay Maskis of Dinosaur Jr. Are you a fan?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he's my favorite musician. So, you know, I wish there was a terrific anecdote other than we asked him, and he said, yeah. And that was it. You know, I'd seen him in, I knew he could act, he was in Gas Food Lodgings, and he just popped into our head as someone who'd be appropriate, and it needed to be someone who'd be memorable, I guess, because you see him for such a small time and then you see him at the end, and yeah.
Okay,
Great question
well, time to go. Richard Ayoade, thank you.
No, thanks for having the film, thanks for staying.